That's okay, because the public comment's not transacting business, it's the obligation of open meetings act, so I would just, when you go to,
Where's the 4 p.m.?
yeah, and, I think you could have a motion, the board can make a motion to make, conduct public comment there.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Yeah, there you go. That makes sense.
Behind your screen.
Cool. There's multiple, I saw two of them before they were moved, but not with multiple views.
All right, we'll get rolling here in about a minute.
Recording in progress.
So folks, by attending tonight, you're joining a Zoom meeting. It is being recorded. We'll try to get this up on the website as quick as we can. It usually takes just under a week. With that, our vendor's pretty responsive to that. I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks indicating that my previous use of the laptop, you got a great look up my nose, and you could hear me and no one else. So we're upgrading technology a little bit. I'm gonna give this a try. We'll have it for this meeting, we'll have it for our regular board meeting in April. If the board chooses to keep it or wanna buy it, we will. If not, it has to go back to the vendor. With that, let's call the meeting to order. Let's stand for the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Folks, bow their heads, please. Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening, and we pray for wisdom, we pray for grace, and we pray for guidance, that we may be smart in what we do. As we go forth, let us hear, not just listen, and let us get the most out of this and help Edenville Township. Amen.
Amen.
We're missing a clerk, so I am going to ask for help recording. Yes, would you like to? Would you like me to? I've got a recording here, so if someone would keep me honest, I'll keep the minutes, and then it'll be fairly brief.
So we could have a temporary clerk.
Yeah.
No?
I would just.
No, we can appoint, I'll take it.
Oh, okay.
If you guys are okay, I'll make a motion that I'll keep minutes on that. Do I have a second? Jim? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, unanimous. I'll be doing my impersonation for minute recording. Sperling?
Yes.
Kay Peters?
Here.
Crystal Starkey? Jamie Lee? Art Peters here. All right, our purpose today is to have an education session by our township attorney. Kyle O'Meara is here from Fahey Schultz Burgix and Road.
Pretty close, better than those Berzik. I didn't know how to pronounce it either.
The majority of the meeting will be Kyle. No, we don't.
It's not a requirement, you certainly can if you want to, but it's not a requirement, it's not a requirement for us.
We will. We'll have to do this now. I've been getting coached.
I have not been. Clearly.
So with that, Kyle, I'm gonna turn this over to you, and see where we go.
Sure. Do you mind if I stand up?
No?
So, let's see what we've got. Probably here. So good evening, Township Board, everybody. My name is Kyle O'Meara. I'm an attorney at Fahey Schultz Burzik Roads. We've represented Edenville Township, I think, since 2009 or so. A little about myself, I've been at Fahey Schultz Burzik Roads for about 7 years. I'm a senior associate. I have drafted this presentation to match what was directed by the board and what is statutory duties was the theme. So townships are created by statute, and everything that township can do is basically prescribed by statute or the Michigan Constitution 1963. And that encompasses a lot, so I'm going to try to get a lot of information in a relatively condensed PowerPoint. about 35 or so, designed for 45 minutes to an hour-ish. And then, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board during the PowerPoint. I'll defer to the board how they want to have the public, if they want to ask me questions or ask the board questions. Happy to do whatever the board would like me to do. So, when we start talking about the PowerPoint, and when I thought about putting this together.
I'm sorry, one quick thing. I will be posting this on the website as well, so folks will have access to all of this material.
Very good. So when I started putting together the PowerPoint, thinking about the presentation and statutory duties, I wanted to split it into 3 separate categories, more or less. So understanding the role of essentially the township and how the township is structured, how the law sets the township up, per se, and what authorities and powers it has. That's statutorily given to the township. Second is to review the main sources of legal authority for the board to act. So kind of statutes that impact the entire board, that impose obligations on the board. So the first is kind of powers, statutes that give the township power. Second, statutes that impose obligations and duties on the entire board as a whole. And then third, individual board duties. I suspect that this is the topic that everybody is very much interested in. The one thing I'm going to try to do and try to emphasize throughout the entire presentation is the entire board needs to function as one for everything. And I know that has been a challenge, and I tried to tailor some of the tips and tricks in here for, at least from an outsider's perspective, of what I've seen potentially be challenges for this particular board and other boards that I've seen before. And then last and most importantly, answer questions. So we're going to get into the role of the board, and I hope you don't mind I lifted pictures from your website. If you want to sue your township attorney, I guess go ahead. But I think
Copyright infringement.
yeah, for copyright infringement of the public website. But the role of the board. So the role of the board and township boards is really unique. It's a unique structure of government. I mean, I think it's obvious. Everybody knows the township is governed by the township board. These are all the decision makers. But when you look into the case law that is interpreted how townships function, how they compare to other forms of government, it's really interesting because there's not a clear, this is the Armstrong-Ypsilanti Township case where the MTA submitted an amicus brief, and it was quoted in this opinion. There's not a clear separation of executive and legislative powers. So it's kind of not like a federal government where you have a president, you have Congress. Here you just have it all in one, and the township board has legislative powers. They pass ordinances, they enter in, well, passing ordinances is the main one. But they also have what are more administrative duties, like we're going to manage a cemetery. Who's the person who's managing the cemetery? Who's responsible for doing that? They have statutory administrative duties as to maintaining uniform accounts, financial accounts. Can you delegate administrative duties versus legislative duties? So in system of government, like our state government and the federal government, you have an executive branch that does a lot of the, or basically all of those administrative duties. I shouldn't say just a lot of them, all of them. But here, it's a mixture, and it's all these. And when you're in a smaller township, and our firm represents townships from the western UP down to the very southeast side of the state, a lot of smaller townships, a lot of the functions are performed in-house. You don't have mountains of staff to do everything for you. So generally, the big takeaway here is decision-making functions of the township are subject to the jurisdiction of the township board itself as a whole for mostly everything, with very limited exceptions. So ultimate theme is when you get into conflict potentially, or disagreement, or uncertainty, that's probably a better way to phrase it, as to who should do what. Remember, the board, almost in every circumstance, can really figure out who can do what, with limited exceptions. We'll talk about. So ethics and order, when we think of township boards and how they can govern, these are the limitations imposed on township boards on how they govern and how decision makers on the township board govern. So some of these are statutory, some of these are not. I know that there's statutory duties, but I'm going to get you a little bit into case law too. So township boards are fiduciaries. They must act in the best interest of the township. Obviously, people will disagree what the best interests of the township are. That's why you have 5 people. That's why you don't have 4 or 6 people. You cannot statutorily, Michigan Incompatible Offices Act, you cannot hold incompatible offices. That generally is an office that would be supervisory of another, subordinate, which they're very similar, but those are 2 factors, or in a breach of trust. I'll give you examples. So you generally can't be a county commissioner and a township board member, especially if you have contracts between the 2 entities, because that would be a breach of trust where you're basically on 2 sides of the contract. Let's say you have a contract with the county to help you do early voting. You can't fulfill your fiduciary duties, which comes from the state law, to act in the best interest of one or the other, because you kind of have to pick one, and you're on both sides. So Incompatible Offices Act says you have to step down from one of the positions when that situation occurs. There's no recusing to get away from it. For townships the size of Edenville, so there's exceptions for townships under 40,000 people, which is quite a lot. It allows you to do things that would be technically incompatible in other jurisdictions, like be the fire chief as well as serve on the township board. If there's an exception for doing additional services for the township. There's an example, there's the AG opinion on this, where a small village, and believe it or not, it's the village of Howard City, so very kind of ironic, but it's a village. The village president was also the village manager, and that was not found to be an incompatible office, even though the village manager is subordinate to the village council. Standards of Conduct Act for public officers and employees. This reads fairly oddly. It doesn't seem like it applies to local officials. It definitely applies to state officials. However, an AG opinion has interpreted it to apply to local officials. It kind of does. It statutorily incorporates a lot of the stuff that is fiduciary duties acting in the best interest of the township. A lot of it's kind of the common sense stuff. So you can't take gifts from someone who's asking for a permit from the township. Let's say they're asking for a special use permit. You can't vote on something when you have a business interest in a particular entity. You're voting on a permit. That kind of stuff. And then last, ethics and orders. So without, and most townships don't have this, without incorporating all of these principles into a policy for internal governance, like what constitutes a conflict of interest that would require you to recuse from deliberation or acting on something, or when can public comment occur, when it can't occur, how it should occur, how meeting organization should work, who does the agenda. If you don't have a policy, it's all determined by this web of statutes, and it's pretty loose. So when you are encountering areas where there's uncertainty as to issues like this, and it's like roadblocks, so many townships operate without any of this. They don't have policies on any of this, and they've all functioned, they've worked with each other very well. But if you continue to have conflict, consider you can pass by resolution internal policies that govern all of the issues that you kind of see above here, and also kind of an internal governance issues.
Kyle,
Yes.
when we do something like that, is that for the duration of the term of that board? Or does that live on until a future board modifies, changes, revokes?
That's a good question. So it is for the life of, it doesn't just extend for the life of the board. So one thing that I think is important to remember is the entity is the township, and the legislative body is the board. The positions are the body and they're served by different people ongoing. So you are agents of the township. Previous boards, when we talk about previous boards, there's not a distinction. You are continuing to be the board ever since the township of Edenville was, or Edenville Township was in existence. So there's no previous board, this board, it's all the same. You are all the same, it's held by different people.
If they adopted a policy, that would govern until it was changed, correct?
Correct. Correct. So, and kind of a little bit getting ahead of myself, when you adopt policies, it's typically by resolution because
Right.
that's governing the internal affairs of the township. When you adopt an ordinance, that is governing third parties. So people outside, like your zoning ordinance, that impacts people that are, residents of the township, third parties, but not the board itself. Well, and the board itself, theoretically, that's being referenced, but. So this is a little bit deeper dive, very similar concepts. I just wanted to put this on here to show this fiduciary duty stuff has been in existence since, essentially the state was founded. You see this is a quote from 1863, the court case. Township board members are agents of their township, sort of like the discussion we just had with Art. They're trusted to carry out public functions for the good of the public and promote the township's interests, not their own. When we think of duties and fiduciary duties, here are some examples. So the cases don't really go into this, but a lot of corporate law cases go into this. These are duties that you see, and you see they're cited from Black's Law Dictionary, that are typical fiduciary duties. So duty of good faith, faithfulness to one obligation to the township board member. So maybe even when things are not going your way, you're gonna function in the in a manner that benefits the board. You're gonna fulfill your obligations, you're gonna fulfill the board's obligations. Duty of loyalty, acting in the interest of the township, we're gonna talk about that one. Duty of care, making reasoned decisions. If you have something that, let's say you show up to a board meeting, something was just thrown in front of you, here's a contract to buy a fire truck and it's $150,000, I have no idea what it says. You have a duty of care, and it's perfectly appropriate to say, I don't feel comfortable with this. And remember, different board members can feel different ways. I'm not gonna make a decision on this because I can't make a reasoned decision. Duty of disclosure, let's say you have something that thinks that it impacts your decision-making, you should disclose that to the board. Or you should declare conflict of interest. Yes, Jeff?
That proper, when you say, I've not reviewed this yet, is it time to table it? Can that be the proper way of doing it at that point?
It can be, so it's on a spectrum, right? So if it's let's say it's an IT contract and it's 2 pages, and you think at a board meeting, yeah, I can spend 10 minutes and discuss this, and, let's say Crystal was the one who brought that before the board, she did all the research, she has 3 proposals, you delegated that to her to present to the board, you feel comfortable taking the recommendation of the board member and doing it. But if you have something very complicated, someone says, hey, here's the new zoning ordinance I want to adopt for Edenville Township, you don't have to say, okay, I have to act on this. You can always vote to table things. So power to contract, again, another obvious one. So part of the reason I'm going through some of these is just to show you where the law comes from, and then there are takeaways. So I think everybody knows the township can contract. I don't know if people know why the township can contract. Power of the contract is in the revised statutes of 1846, so everything from the township comes from a statute, I think it's chapter 16 or section 16. There's the power of the contract. The one thing about municipal contracts that I think is very important, and it's very important, I think, to build trust with your vendors, yourself, is persons dealing with a township when they contract, if there wasn't an authority, let's say Art, and not saying you do this, but he's gonna go out and he signed a contract for a new fire truck and he didn't talk to any members of the township board. That contract is technically declared void. It's not, and there's nothing you can really do about it. The law is pretty nasty against you, if you're the other party. So when you're contracting, I think the biggest takeaway is make sure you have a clear procedure and process, make sure it's in place, to make sure your decisions are binding, and also that the board is informed. Because the last thing, people don't want to do business with people that, you say you're gonna do, I'm acting on the authority of Edenville Township, we don't really have authority, think about when you're making expenditures, when you're doing contracts, have procedures in place, have controls in place to ensure that everything is reflective of the board or something delegated by the board. Township attorney, statutes allow townships to hire an attorney, same revised statutes of 1846. So as a general law township, that's your statute. That's your statute where you get all your authority. You get your authority also from the Constitution. There's also a charter township act which won't apply to you. The charter townships, that old act applies to them too. Township attorney represents the board, directed by the board. The board is essentially a 5-member board, so it's kind of a majority rules type system. Bound by the rules, commission, professional conduct, organization is the client, so I have to represent the township. The most, what I tell essentially all of our clients is to be effective as the township attorney, I need to have good relationships with everybody on the board to the extent possible. And that is the best way I may not be able to do what a person wants me to do, because that is what I've been directed by, an action of the board. But for me to be most effective, I need to have a clear line of communication. So, township supervisor is the agent of the township for the transaction of legal business. That doesn't mean the township supervisor makes all the legal decisions of the township. There are townships on a wide spectrum of how they handle township supervisors. Some say all legal goes through the township. We're going to delegate to the supervisor. The supervisor is going to be the one that interacts with the attorney, and he or she has some leeway based on our budget to interact with the attorney after the attorney question. If you are following the default rule, where that's not the case, then it's the board directs the attorney. The board tells the attorney what to do, what kind of business to do, and so forth. Different townships do this different ways. You can think about who can contact the attorney, who you'd like to contact the attorney. Some townships do. Township supervisor has some latitude. Township clerk, if there's a FOIA issue, has some latitude, and the treasurer can contact the attorney. Some are always a majority vote of the township. Some are the supervisor. All forms are acceptable. It's just making sure whatever is happening is supported by the board as a whole. Employees and appointees. This is probably the most confusing one that I think townships get confused about, and it makes sense because it is intuitive in some ways. So I sometimes give the example, and this is more for special assessments, but the way that I present how special assessments work to a board and to the public when we're going through hearings for special assessments, you have to follow the statutes. And how I manage my own finances looks a lot different. So yeah, how I manage my finances, maybe I would have bids and stuff before I have a public hearing about whether I want to do a weed control project on a lake. But the way that sometimes statutes work is you have a public hearing on the concept of the idea before you even know what the costs are. So much different, but you have to follow what the law provides for you. Same thing with employees and appointees. So when we think of employees and appointees, I think many townships, it's confusing because you have officials in the office at certain times, and the trustees are not in there. And there sometimes are, and sometimes I get calls from supervisors like, hey, people think that I need to manage the administrative, utility billing clerk, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. Well, the default rule is the township board is the personnel manager, basically, as a whole, which can be kind of awkward because you do things in public. You can delegate to other people, and the deputies are responsible to clerk, supervisor, treasurer, are responsible to the individuals, subject to their salaries by the board, but everything reports to the township board. Discipline, termination, hiring, raises, so forth, of employees. Other appointees are subject to appointment provisions of enabling statutes, so most of them are For example, I'll give you the planning commission statute, planning enabling act. Supervisor makes a recommendation essentially for an appointee, and then the board ratifies it or does not ratify it. And then that's how that functions. But everything reports to the board. Township property, township combined sell property. I think that's pretty obvious. One thing that I think is maybe beneficial for the public, also maybe beneficial for the board. Case law recognizes, and this is a federal court case, Sixth Circuit case, that buildings, even if they're public buildings, they don't necessarily mean you can roam around anywhere you want, even though it's a public building. Like, let's say you want to see President Trump and you're going to go to the White House. I can guarantee, even though your tax dollars pay for that, you're not going to go see him whenever you want. So townships can restrict areas to the public. This would be a limited public forum, so it's appropriate to come in here during a township board meeting, but on a random day, you likely can't just hang out here unless the township allows you to. The other thing that this principle governs, where you get the authority, is township boards can determine what township property is able to be used by certain offices, officials, or whatever. So the board can decide this office space is dedicated to the treasurer, this office space is dedicated to the clerk, this file cabinet is the clerk, this file cabinet can be used by everybody. That is the detail that you can get into. Very detailed and minutia. Some townships, they don't need to do any of that. Some townships, they do need to do that. Again, the theme is when there is conflict, disagreement, go to the board. And that is who ultimately has to say. Board success is township success. Board members owe a duty of loyalty to the public. Disagreements on procedural issues, infighting, are not the most efficient use of the time and money of the township. I will say that we sometimes have a fun joke where the best clients we have are the most dysfunctional clients we have because they always need help. And I don't want, our success is really based on our client's success. I've always believed in that principle, and it's my goal to use, where you can use me basically as little as you want, and you don't need to use me. So just the other thing is dysfunction and disagreement and not being able to resolve it often erodes public trust. I think everybody recognizes that, discourages township officials and appointed officials. So some ideas. I think the board approved facilitation of the Michigan Township Association. I think that's very helpful. Goal setting or workshop meetings to determine priorities of the board. One thing that I think is very helpful, and it seems a little bit like common sense, goal setting, having workshop meetings, not a regular township meeting, but just sitting down, what are our priorities of the board? Because sometimes at a board meeting, you'll have many things that come up, and then you'll try to add to it, and then things are important to some people, they're not important to other people. So when you do goal setting or setting priorities, the one thing that is helpful is if you're in that situation where you're doing that, to perhaps poll the board, okay, what's our number one priority? I know we want to do all 10 of these things. What's our number one priority? What things do we want to accomplish next quarter? What things do we accomplish within the year? And make them go that way, because then sometimes when something is brought up on the agenda by, let's say somebody wants to bring something up that's different, you can always go back to, we agreed as a board, this is at our workshop, our goal setting, and we can even facilitate this with facilitators. These are our priorities. We want to stay on track for our priorities. And then obviously creating policies for more certainty. Some townships is necessary, some townships is unnecessary, but common ones are attorney contact, facilities, who can use what, agenda items, how you get things on the agenda, who prepares the agenda, when does the packet go out, uniform things. We're not going to consider something that is brought up at a meeting that wasn't, on the agenda. That kind of thing. Statutory obligations of the township. Now we're getting into the statutory duties. So that was your powers, and then here are the duties that are going to impact you as a whole. So basic legal principles, again, dry powers by statute. However, those are liberally construed, so your powers are determined to be as expansive as the statutes allow you to be, but you cannot conflict with state law. And when we go into now the duties that are provided that you need to meet, here are very common examples. So the first I'm going to start with the sunshine statutes, Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Act. Both were passed in the 1970s. So they're actually not as old as you think. Before that, township board of business could happen, you're not posting notices, besides what the statutes in 1846 tell you to do, which is some very goofy things like go post it around 4 common areas of the township and then publish it. So Freedom of Information Act, before then, you can't, it was kind of up to, I'm gonna go see the township and they're gonna give me what I want, or maybe they won't. But now, the purpose of the Freedom of Information Act is to be able to provide public records to the public, subject to some exceptions. So some exceptions are some obvious ones, attorney-client privilege. Some of the other ones, if it has something, if someone's personnel file has their social security number on it, you're not gonna get that. That's gonna be redacted. But it's to make public documents available to the public, or records of township available to the public for the purposes of understanding how the township is operating. So, it applies to electronic records. It applies to anything you're doing in furtherance of basically related to township duties. So if you are texting about a constituent about a township issue, those text messages are subject to the FOIA. You're texting another board member about something related to the township. Those text messages are subject to the FOIA. Some things to think about when you're engaging in whatever, in emails, whatever, they're going to be subject to the FOIA. So anything you write, you should probably consider, well, what if, everybody in the public saw what I was going to write? So sometimes that, and I have to do the same thing too, even though all my stuff is, attorney-client privilege, but at the same time, I tend to do that myself, where I anticipate, someone may read what I write, and I want to make sure it's professional, I want to make sure it's supported. So, public records, written, electronic, basically everything related to the township. Township FOIA coordinator is the one responsible for processing FOIA requests. Township FOIA coordinator is not designated to a particular official of the board. Many townships, it's the clerk. My experience working with Edenville Township a while ago, it was the clerk. But it can be anybody on the board. And typically the board vote who the FOIA coordinator is. Your township FOIA policy on your website likely outlines who the FOIA coordinator is. I suspect it would say the clerk. So you would have a FOIA procedures and guidelines and a written public summary of your FOIA, written procedures and guidelines. Those two documents are very important. You may think they're kind of just like not important, but you can't charge fees under the FOIA unless you have those posted online. So make sure that they are posted online if I look, but those are very important documents. Initial response to the FOIA request must occur within 5 business days. What you can do is, if you're the FOIA coordinator, you can say, we grant the request, we grant it in part, so we have some of what you're saying, but we may have to redact some of it, or we deny it, we don't have your records, we're denying it, or you can issue an extension for 10 business days, so 15 business days, because it may take you more time. Let's say someone asks for, I want all the communications between the treasurer and the trustee, or I want to see all the communications between the treasurer and whatever bank Edenville Township uses. Well, that may take a very long time. You're going to have to dig through emails. You're going to have to, it may not be very intuitive, where I'm going to go, search by subject line. I might have to go through all my emails for 6 months. That may be a time to issue an extension. You can charge fees for the FOIA. You're not going to make money on the FOIA. You're not even going to recoup probably your costs on the FOIA, but the FOIA allows you to charge 10 cents a page per copy. You can also charge money for the cost of labor time to search for the records and make copies. So I need to look through this bin of records. That took me an hour. I can charge an hour's worth of time in 15-minute increments. The rate has to be the lowest hourly paid person at the township capable of doing the job. I think a question that often comes is, township board members are going to be like, I make X number of dollars a year. This is my salary, and that would be like $2 an hour. Well, that's not the case. It would be the normal hourly pay. So if you have someone making $15 an hour, then it'd be $15 an hour. It's capable of doing the job. So let's say emails are on. Let's say you're a larger township. Let's say you have a township engineer. Emails are on the township engineer's computer. Well, theoretically, administrative assistants could probably go on the township engineer's computer and do it. So you use the rate of the administrative assistant, not the township engineer. Open Meetings Act, other sunshine statutes. This is requiring meetings to be open to the public, so the township board will be deliberating and or deciding a public policy. I talked to an older attorney one time, which was interesting. He was telling me about practicing before the Open Meetings Act and how one of his clients met on like the second floor of a building, and usually it was just the board and the township attorney. It seemed like a very different perspective, very much different. But obviously, everything needs to be posted. There's no requirement for something that many people don't know. There's no requirement for an agenda in the Open Meetings Act. There's no requirement for you to use Robert's rules in the Open Meetings Act. Basically, what it's the law says majority vote. However you come there, majority vote. There's some things that you have to pass by roll call vote, resolutions being one of them. Certain financial obligations are others. You'll never be in trouble if you use a roll call vote, but there are some provisions where it's specified roll call vote. Must provide for public comment subject to reasonable rules. So what this says, the Open Meetings Act says, during the meeting, the public must be allowed to address the board. It doesn't say when, it doesn't say for how long, it doesn't say the beginning of the meeting, the end of the meeting, it doesn't say whether you can ask the board questions, it doesn't say whether you can yield time to another person. Those are all things that have been interpreted as reasonable rules. It's a very broad standard, that's essentially what the Act says, that townships can do. So a smorgasbord of reasonable restrictions have been 3 minutes a person. It doesn't have to be question and answer. It can be just pure comment. You can't yield time to others. You can make people, you can't make them necessarily sign in, but you can maybe make them state their name, those kind of things. Meeting notices, big one. So this gets a little bit confusing because different statutes say different things about meeting notices. This is the default rule. State the name of the township, be posted at the hall, contain the township address, contain the township phone number. Other statutes may require more information. The Michigan Zoning Enabling Act for public hearings requires additional information. It needs to say like the property of the subject of the request, number of different things, maybe parcel numbers and addresses. That's the default here. Other things, revised statute of 1846 say a meeting notice, well, it actually doesn't say it needs to, but it says boards at a special meeting can only transact the business that is in the special meeting notice. Transacting businesses, functions, actual functions are not kind of statutory. Public comment is statutory. That's not transacting business, that's hearing the public. So, Open Meetings Act, meeting notices are the most important. Open Meetings Act, not to scare anybody, but the Open Meetings Act is one of the statutes where intentional violations, and it's relatively hard to have an intentional violation, can be punished by civil penalties, and they actually can be punished by criminal penalties. And some of the saddest things that I've seen are, unfortunately, like I've represented a township where unknowingly public comment was shut off. And then someone complained to the state police. And then the state police interviewed the one of the board members about cutting off public comment. Kind of scary stuff. Remember, it has to be intentional. So in many cases, you're all, I think, very well informed board members, but you may not have the Open Meetings Act memorized. But just know that if there's one place to be cautious, this is probably where I'd be cautious. Of course, I want you to be cautious about everything. So, mentioned this at the beginning, General Law Township Act, revised statutes of 1846. Township's body, corporate body, and entity. Things that it does a lot of things, does everything in this presentation, essentially. Allows you to set salaries. Set salaries a couple ways. You can do it by resolution. You can do it by, there's officials, officers, compensation board, which I don't think Edenville Township has. One thing about setting salaries is you cannot, during the term of someone's service, reduce their salary. Meetings, special meetings, call a supervisor, or by the signed request of majority board members provided to the clerk. Notices for special meetings to contain the purpose of the business to be transacted. Otherwise, unless you don't have everybody here, you can't do anything. So, requirements for 3 board members to transact business, that's a quorum. I think many people just think quorum majority, but different sections say different things. So this one says 3, others say other things. Other obligations and other kind of maybe empowerments that statutes give townships. Township ordinances, main two are the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. That was a compilation, or it was recodified, where townships used to have their own zoning act. Cities and counties, like all the entities have their own zoning act. Now there's only one in 2006. That allows the adoption of land use ordinances. Township Ordinances Act allows the adoption of police power ordinances. Examples: this governs activities, this governs land use, this governs where things are going to go, essentially. This governs things that may occur on a property. So blight. Blight's a great example, because you could have a proper land use, single-family dwelling, that's a proper land use. So under the zoning ordinance, that's your regulation, that's the right setbacks and everything. But the activity occurring on the land of someone collecting a bunch of junk tires and doing all sorts of stuff, that's an activity that you could outlaw. So activities, noise ordinance, those are activities. Adoption process of these ordinances are significantly different. The Township Ordinance Act can come to a meeting. You can adopt the police power ordinance. It becomes effective either 30 days after publication if it has a penalty provisions, or immediately upon publication if it has no penalty. Michigan Zoning Enabling Act requires a public hearing of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission has a public hearing. If I recall correctly, I don't think Midland County has a planning commission, but in most counties you have to send the proposed ordinance to the county planning commission. They have 30 days to make their recommendation. Then goes to the township board. They adopt it. Township board adopts it. It's effective after 7 days upon publication, unless there's a referendum petition submitted to the township. Then, in which case, I think there's 30 days that allows 50% of people to get signatures, and then it goes to the voters. Most cases, it becomes effective after 7 days. But drastically different. One thing that, and this is kind of from my experience representing the township, most townships, although it's not required, planning commission will do land use ordinance and review the zoning ordinance. Township board will handle all the police power ordinance. However, I have seen many townships, and I've seen them do it effectively. They may ask their planning commission, hey, do you have input on a blight ordinance, for example? So, just a thought, but mostly it's that way. Yes.
A couple times we've had close relationships with other townships. When you adopt an ordinance, you let them know too, because sometimes it could affect their property if it affects our property. So it's a courtesy. We've done that in the past.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I think it's also helpful so I've had there's some counties, and actually I'm having a presentation with MTA next week about intergovernmental collaboration. In Clare County, a lot of the townships have adopted the same blight ordinance, and the county helps do the blight enforcement. They have the agent go out. Township ends up, helping prosecute it, but all the informal hearings and everything happens kind of with these county officials, and they all have the same ordinance. So that can be very helpful. And if you are able to work with your neighbors to be able to do stuff like that, it can save money. It can build efficiency. Yes, sir.
So a couple of questions to make sure we don't get ourselves in trouble. Our colleagues from Hope here, we both are on the northern border of the county, and so we share a lot of common kinds of interests. We could both get together. Our planning commissions could meet, even our boards could meet, but they'd both be an open meeting requirement.
Yeah, so what you would do is you would notice it likely as a special meeting. It could be a joint special meeting with both township boards. I've done that for actually a aquatic weed project where lake is in 2 townships. They want to do special assessment. They don't want to have 4 public hearings for the whole thing. They just want to have 1. So they hold it together, and that you can certainly do that. One thing just to make sure that you do is you try to find a location that, like, it would not, if you were going to say, I'm going to have a joint public meeting with I know you went through this, but with Hope Township, and I want to go to the Renton in Detroit. The statute doesn't say you can't do that, but you'll probably get sued. So make sure that it's convenient and accessible.
Just several years ago, we did have a fire communication with all this area, met over in Billings Township, with all the fire departments here, and we could future. I attended it also. Very enhancing to what everybody's trying to do at the same time.
And you can also have, so, I didn't say this in the Open Meetings Act section, but Open Meetings Act governs public meetings. So public meetings mean is a quorum of the board is together to deliberate or make policy decisions. So deliberate is kind of talk about policy or, and make policy decisions off the voting. One thing to keep in mind is the quorum of the township board can be in the same place at the same time. Like, let's say it's an educational meeting, let's say the county's putting on an educational meeting about some service they'd like to provide the township. You can all show up there, you just can't communicate with each other and share your kind of thoughts. So it's it's a little bit dangerous, but you can always do that. And the other exception to the Open Meetings Act that has been recognized by the Attorney General is you can have a solely educational presentation, actually kind of like this, not in a public meeting, however, you really can't ask any questions. So it challenges it a little bit, but you can do that. Or they can't be questions that are related to the township, they can be questions related to you can definitely do it, it's just, there's a little slip up. Fees for service, these have to be basically proportionate to the service provided. So if you're charging a zoning permit fee, it's not necessarily, it can't be, I'm just gonna pick a number out of the hat and I wanna make money from it. It has to be proportionate to for our zoning officer. How much does it cost? It's not a perfect science, kind of the same way that water and sewer rates are made, but it's at least a thoughtful practice that you get to try to be, and we had 150 zoning permits last year. Our cost of having a zoning officer cost this much. This is what we're gonna make a permit. So, Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. This is the act that your auditor and accountant, that they will know very, very well, much better than I do. All units of government in Michigan, local units of government, have to have the standard charts and accounts. That's why when you look at audits from City Midland, it's gonna look like the same as Edenville Township, because it's the same charts of accounts, you have the same code numbers. It's so, I went to a seminar, even when you look at the little numbers on the charts, they're all the same, and they all mean things. So general fund has a certain number and so forth. And then last, obligations, another obligation, you have a duty to retain records. According to Michigan's record retention schedule, it's actually, in the penal code, it says if you don't retain records, you willfully destroy them or let them go away. That can be criminal, however, obviously willfully is another high standard. The thing to just remember is, state of Michigan does a really great job for you. They make charts for you, how long things have to be preserved for. So if I recall correctly, like, if you use a recorder to record a meeting for the purpose of the meeting minutes, you can delete the recording right after you make the meeting. But everything has different things. Emails have different schedule and so forth. Secondary sources. So before we get into the individuals, I just want to show, at least, or not show, but outline when and how and what I would use if I were in your shoes when you identify a problem. So secondary sources like guidebooks, I see Crystal has one right now, they're awesome to use. They're going to have a ton of information. MTA has great resources, the Little Red Book, that's like the Bible of Township. Very good. Other advisory sources from the Attorney General are good, especially for the Freedom of Information Act, Open Meetings Act. When to seek counsel, secondary sources will be written for broad audiences, extremely broad audiences. You have to be a little bit careful applying it to your facts, because, like, if I'm writing a legal opinion for 1,200 townships or writing a state, I'm going to say what is absolutely going to be correct in every single circumstance. However, if Edenville Township is presented with a particular problem, wants to get to a solution, and has all of these different facts, you may not have to do what's in the book. The law may support something else. Attorney General opinion, just keep in mind, going to be highly persuasive authority. However, they are persuasive authority, they are not binding. So until a court rules on it, Attorney General opinion is sort of like an opinion if I write one, on township law. It's a thought, and it's going to have legal support. It's going to be very educated, not guess is a very bad word for it, but it's, what's the thought is. Secondary sources, sometimes do not include legal citations, and there may be multiple ways to solve problems. That's what I sometimes see, sometimes you're looking and book says this, doesn't offer citation, doesn't cite the case law, that's where you may need to see counsel. Most of the time is, I want to solve a problem, and I think from the readily apparent materials I have, they don't necessarily solve problems for me. So I need, backup. Or I'm having these particular issues, I want to have tailored advice. Legal interpretation, this is again where it kind of gets challenging, reading things in isolation. So sometimes just reading a line of text in these statutes, especially the ones, the 1846 statutes, they're going to have a lot of provisions that are essentially, I don't say nullified, but they're no longer applicable, but they're still in there, and you can't, it's hard to determine unless you kind of do it for a living, what is going to apply, what's not going to apply. You follow the cases. So first thing you do, plain and ordinary language, what it means to the normal person, based on grammar, syntax, so forth, definitions, dictionary definitions. Then you have to read statutes in harmony. So this is something that can make things have what it appears to have an ordinary meaning, but it has a completely different meaning. So I'll give you a great example, and it's somewhat relevant. Well, it's an example that would be, I think, relevant to here. So you have the 4 lakes. The 4 lake levels are subject to Part 307 of Michigan's Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Part 309 of Michigan's Natural Resources and Protection Act is the same family of statutes. Part 309 says you can do lake improvements that benefit a lake, but there's a Part 307. Well, Part 307 is lake improvements that do lake levels. The specific language governs over the general, and you have to read them in harmony. So even though Part 309 may say you can do lake improvements, in my opinion, you have to use Part 307, the procedures of Part 307, which are much different than Part 309. Part 307 requires you to go to a court, do all this kind of goofy stuff. Part 309 is you have a lake improvement board that determines whether you want to. So like the Sanford Lake Improvement Board, the Wixom Lake Improvement Board. And then the last, so courts will read statutes to try to avoid absurd results. Like, I'll give you a good one. There's a statute, there's the Planning Enabling Act, the Planning Commission member terms are for a set period of time. Depends on which official, for, I think it's 2 years. If a township forgets to make reappointments, courts don't say, well, that's invalid, because the person's technically not a planning commission member anymore. They want to avoid absurd results because the township's going to have to function and have to have a planning commission. What courts say is, well, there's no penalty prescribed for not doing it, so they can act until a replacement is served. Kind of interesting. So you get things that are not very apparent from the text that happen by this legal system. All right, board member statutory duties. Major concepts. Marathon Oil, statutes will spell out duties of offices, but most can be delegated. So if for whatever reason you can't do a duty, you can almost always delegate it to someone. Example, large township, 40,000+ people. Their clerk is an elected official. However, at that point, when an organization becomes that large, you need professional staff. So they have clerks, certified clerks that work for them. Same community. They have a treasurer, but they also have a finance director because things get very complicated. Statutes allow you to delegate essentially administrative duties. You can delegate administrative duties, you can't delegate legislative functions. Key thing to think about when you are delegating legislative, what is delegating a legislative function? What is an example of that? Let's say you want to enter into a contract with somebody. Let's say you want to resolve a blight case. And the person wants in the ordinance, you're going to resolve the blight case, you're okay with this fence that doesn't necessarily meet the zoning ordinance requirements, and you're going to put in the consent judgment that you will never adopt, the township board will never adopt a fence ordinance that would prohibit fences or that are greater than 10 feet tall. That's a legislative function of the township. That's their ability to make law. you can't delegate that or otherwise contract it away. So you can't say, my father-in-law, he knows a lot about solar projects, so I'm gonna have him, he's gonna do all the research for me, and he's gonna kind of post for me. You can't do that, you can't delegate like that. But you can do bank reconciliation, managing finances of the township, statutory functions of office, those you can delegate. The second thing, this is kind of a sad one, but business of the township needs to get done. There is no benefit in waiting for something not to get done and then just saying, well, it was their statutory duty. It has to get done. And there's not a great mechanism. If you just blame someone, it falls on the board. It's kind of like, you're the captain of the ship, it all comes to you. So if someone's not doing what you think they're supposed to, or even it doesn't matter. You just have to get it done somehow. And if you can't just blame, if there's not a good mechanism to do that. Certain elected officials post bonds to try to, in part, ensure that activities can be performed. So we had I know of an example of a township clerk who decided to just put all the bills in her purse, basically, and keep them there, and never, and then the lights went off, and all this stuff happened. The bond in that case can be used to try to remedy that, but usually it's not, it's not a lot. So the process of, you can't just you all should be really a team, and you can't just get rid of people. The governor has not removed, well, one, the standard of removal of a board member is, they essentially have to commit, they have to do like a Kwame Kilpatrick kind of situation, where you're gonna be doing crazy embezzlement, and even then, I'm not sure, has been used almost ever. All right. Supervisor. So supervisor statutory duties, technically chief assessor, but if you're not certified as an assessor, then you hire an assessor. You have to hire an assessor. Can appoint a deputy, different than the clerk and treasurer, who has to appoint a deputy. Moderator of the meeting, what that generally means is kind of the function that you saw today. Opens the meeting, calls for votes, but it doesn't necessarily mean can require the meeting to talk about this. You're going to require people to vote certain ways. It's just moderator, organizing the meeting. Not the same role as strong mayor. So it's not a mayor of Detroit. Some people think supervisor means you are personnel director, you are the, you're the point person for all the media, you are everything, and kind of encompass kind of like what a mayor of a large city would do, like Mayor Flint, Mayor of Detroit. You have administrative, you control the staff, not strong mayor. Equal voice on the board. That goes back to your Ypsilanti Township case, Armstrong, with some other duties. Can call special meetings. That's one provision that really supervisor can call special meeting and can specify the purposes. Township's legal agent. If you sue a township, your service will go to supervisor or township attorney, sub-service, of course, it's the township, goes to the township attorney. Township legal agent, again, we talked about it, doesn't mean it makes all the difference. Sometimes non-statutory duties, which can be delegated to the supervisor, include personnel management, sometimes being the point, doing the press release items, and then sometimes FOIA coordinator. I have been told, but I have never looked into this, that the original FOIA paid supervisor to FOIA coordinator. Although that is obviously not true. Clerk. So clerk, custodian of the records that are not provided to other offices. That can be very confusing. I tend to like just having the clerk be able to, assuming you are able to work with all together, being able to have custody of records, but technically if they're assigned to a different office, that office has just custody of the records. There's references to the supervisor and treasurer about them maintaining their records, their certain records. Coordinates with treasurer by maintaining the general ledger, revenues, and received, expenditure paid, record meeting minutes, prepare financial statements in accordance with Uniform Chart of Accounts, that's your Uniform Budgeting Act, and elections. Elections is huge, I didn't cite the election code, but there's a lot of provisions on election code. There is a handout too, which I know you guys have, that goes into much greater detail. Common non-statutory duties I've seen for clerks, cemetery, FOIA coordinator, accounting and record keeping and helping with the audit because they have that responsibility, provided to the administrative general. Technically, budgeting process, I think it defaults to the supervisor. In audit, it doesn't really say. Treasurer, safe keeps money, takes charge of all funds belonging to the township, receipt money to custody, keeps account with fund balance. The intent of the revised statutes with the clerk and the treasurer is really with money, which is the most important thing. I shouldn't say the most important thing, but one of the most important things that the township does has money, has public money, has your money, checks and balances, expenditures, and deposits between the clerk and the treasurer. Collects delinquent property, so other things the treasurer does, writes checks, keeps account fund balance, collects delinquent personal property tax, delinquent real property tax is collected by the county treasurer. Collects mobile home specific tax. I don't know if you have any of those, but there are mobile homes that there's a state law that has a mobile home tax. Investment of surplus funds. You have an investment policy. It designates how the treasurer can invest surplus funds of the township. Often, many townships use I think it's a class. And then common additional duties, also similar to the clerk, cemeteries, fire insurance funds, so you can have a fire insurance withholding fund, designates the possibility. Trustees, you don't really have this detail that is a little bit awe-inspiring, and quite frankly, I think you all think statutory duties, and they are very important. But I will say, I think there's 1,240 townships. They are all making their duties work, and it may not exactly mirror what it says on your handout and here. Biggest thing is just to make it work. Of course, you can't override a statutory duty, but if someone doesn't feel comfortable doing one of their statutory duties, they can have people help. Trustees have limited, this is exactly what you have to do. They're the legislators. They are constituent. They are trustees, they are constituent focused, can perform a number of functions for the board. We'll show some examples. Serve on the planning commission, become part of committees, intergovernmental collaboration, and so forth. One thing that I see, not specified in the act, however, play a key role in helping navigate township office challenges. When you have the 3 members of the board that are in the office, things may happen. Outsiders that are not in the office give a very good neutral perspective on what they think may be the appropriate solution at board meetings that may help navigate challenges or issues of township. Additional extra duties. So there's statutory duties, and then there's all sorts of the services that townships have. So, for example, you guys have a website. Statute doesn't say who maintains the website. That's an additional duty. Doing RFPs, you have special assessments or otherwise, waste collection and management, contract with companies, contracting, communications, maintaining your facilities, your parks, code authority, utility billing. All of this is stuff that is flexible that the board can direct individuals to do. One thing I think it's obvious, and I probably don't need to say it, is if someone doesn't want to do something, please. I have not seen good success from just assigning it to them. I have seen township, remember as a township board meeting, the new trustee got appointed, someone resigned, and first thing they did is, well, that trustee was on the fire board, so you're gonna be on the fire board. It's like, well, I worked until 5:30 and the fire board meeting is at 5. And unfortunately the answer was, well, they're on the fire board, so you're gonna be on the fire board, you're just gonna have to make it work. Well, that's not fair to them, and it's not going to give the best results to the township, don't do that. So in closing, and you're gonna have much greater detail, and I'm happy to answer questions in greater detail. Township board's one unit, and is ultimately responsible for the township. So township board is going to be able to make solutions for issues that arise, and it can delegate certain duties to others, that need to happen. Officials hold statutory duties, such as chief assistant, talk about that. Most important, tasks need to get done, not pigeonhole blame on an individual. I would never actually try to blame individuals. It's ideas that you try to navigate. It is not individual. You can have, if someone makes a mistake, you can say they made a mistake, but the thing, like basically just saying, this individual, you know, they're not getting it done, so nothing's getting done. That's not a method that works. After understanding statutory obligations, board members that may help schedule workshops to help identify goals and priorities for the township. That long list of things, and I know you have the red book that also has a long list of things. That list of things was created, we gave a presentation to, I believe, MAP, the Township Supervisors Association, with the roles of each member, clerk, treasurer, and supervisor. And that's how a lot of that stuff was came out and put into that. There's stuff that you're going to learn by just reading that and quite frankly reading the red book. And if you think, if it's not functioning the way that those statutes say, the best thing to do is talk about it. And then see if you want to maintain the status quo, if you want to do something else. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
First, I'd say, please take a breath. Ran down pretty well.
No, that's okay, I forgot.
There might be some in the fridge.
So, we're good, Katrina, we found one. Kyle, one of the things that I've come across is in the township, there is a flow, or at least a requirement to have 2 signatures on checks. On that. Is there a mandated or prescribed way that should be done, or is that more of an operational thing that we'll get to in the workshop?
I think that's more of an operational thing. When you see in the handout, it talks about the treasurer writing checks. Typically, I don't see taking checks, but they talk about issuing warrants and doing stuff and use kind of archaic language. It's more of a procedural flow thing. I think it helps with the checks and balances, to be honest. And a township of this size, you're probably not writing the most checks in, I would say, in the world. So it probably can work, at least.
I'm looking at Jim and Chris.
Well, we got some non-funders that are quite large.
Oh, but we write checks, I mean.
In the bond.
How many a month?
I think he's talking about the number of checks.
Number of checks.
Not the amount.
Yeah, I think maybe
There's considerable.
20 a month kind of thing, maybe. I'm just.
30 to 50.
Okay, 30 to 50, okay, well, that's more than I thought.
Well, if you add in tax disbursements.
Yep.
during tax
Um,
season.
Okay, so I understand, unfortunately, from having spent a little bit of time in the financial system, that when you start something and it has 1 signature on a 2-signature thing, it becomes, I believe, a warrant, and then it becomes a check once it's been signed twice or something goofy like that. And I just was curious if that is prescribed or if that's more historical. And
So the prescription is an MCL 41.
Okay, are you looking at?
Page 7. system, I'm not sure I would change it. Just for the fact that, are you approving the checks for the board games? Like, a lot of townships will have a stack of checks with board games, sign them there.
Oh, okay.
I've seen, like, the sign like right after, and that's when it'll happen. One thing is take off.
Somebody has to, some,
Well,
But maybe that might, I'm trying to think here, that might become a good way of doing it.
well, so then that would involve quite a process of review before.
Yeah.
Right, and with it, already the trustees do review.
Well, it can
Part
be,
of the process.
it can be part of the packet, right? So your expenditures, these are gonna be your expenditures, you
Right.
can approve it.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Part of the flow.
there's some, there are normal bills, so we don't continue with bills, telephone and electricity, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you paid ahead of time.
And that can
due
be,
dates.
and you can do that, you can clear, so recurring bills, I think, you can, it's basically a delegation, you are approving them, so you can approve them in issue.
I'm sorry. I'm a little, tired, so did I just hear you say, Kyle, that it's okay if there's only one person's signature on?
I'd have to double check, I'd have to double check that statutory provision. My recollection, so, for example, sometimes I go to township board meetings, and then they give me the check. A lot of the times when I'm looking at those, it's signed by one person. And the way that, it's really a preference of the township. So, for example, that particular township, I'm at the township board meeting, they approve their expenses, the entire board's sitting there, and then the treasurer has the checks that is coordinating with the expenses of each time. It's really, there's a lot of flexibility, and if that's the custom, and you wanna keep the custom that way, but it's becoming maybe hard to coordinate schedules at office hours, you can do it at the board meeting, the afterwards.
I think as long as this township, as I know, it's always had two signatures. Normally the clerk receives the bill and reviews the bill, okay, and okay, new electricity bill comes in, okay, this is $250, $500, whatever it is. We'll look at that thing, that needs to be sent, and then it goes over to the treasurer to take it out of the account that's there, and then we get her signature. And that's basically the way we transpire our bills. So one person is receiving most of the bills, 90% of them come through the clerk's office, okay? And then they proceed after they look at them, okay, this check that be for $550. And then it goes over to treasurer, make sure we have that in the account before we write the check. And we have, how many accounts we have, Kathy? I mean,
Do we really wanna know?
no, I don't.
We have a lot of work to do
I know,
with
it's about
that.
70, I think, total.
And that, there's 19,
Yeah, that's okay.
which is,
But I think it's been a custom for this one to have two signatures, and basically, clerk gets the bills, looks at it, okay, this is what it starts the check, then it proceeds over here, and then, okay, we have the funding, and that gets signed, and then we review it. This one I review most of those, and we look at it.
my experience has been with such a small office that the flow of things probably, we need to identify that and then, and put maybe procedures in.
Another, yeah, I mean,
Processes
you can
in
make
place
the
so
board
that-
can make a process, reimbursement process, and, or whatever expenditure process. We would like the treasurer and the clerk to be at the office at 2:00 every Wednesday, we got, I mean, it may,
Sorry. I'm so tired, I'm sorry.
You shouldn't be sorry.
Be that simple, if it could be this.
There are certain things that have transpired, unfortunately. And when we look at the laws that are out there for boards doing township business, I've heard of a whole bunch of statutes in the last several months that I haven't heard in 15 years of service that was thrown at us. You're gonna violate this statute. I don't think we really been breaking the law for that long a period of time, and we have new members on the board, and that's okay, that's good. But you need, that little office has been there for 30-some years plus. Not all personalities get together, gel, but we need to work, process the bills, process the work, and then do the township business first, before personalities get into it. And we gotta learn to do that. I'm sorry, it's just my feeling.
And so I can tell you how many times I've been asked how many signatures on checks in my 7 years at Fahey, and, us representing 150 plus municipal clients. And this is the first time I've been asked how many signatures. Because it just doesn't happen, and that's one of the things I tend to emphasize for here is you're going to, and it's just to be candid, you're just gonna have to figure it out, and you have to figure it out. There's no not figuring it out. And, it's kind of, you just have to do it, right? It just has to happen. And and if there's personality conflict, the remainder of the board that may not have personality conflicts in that direct situation needs to, I think, exert kind of their viewpoints and try to mediate some of it. That's just how it is.
Kind of a majority rule.
Yeah, you try your best to try to make everybody heard and incorporate every idea, but at the end of the day, things need to function, and that's what the statute protects.
It's not the 5 members who sit up here, it's the township who we serve. No matter what we do, hopefully we solve what's happening there and do what we're supposed to do with work. And then go from there, But we all have different, you've got the light on when you yell at you, no kidding, okay? You don't step on someone's toe, you just do what you're supposed to do, and you pass it over like you're supposed to do it. We need to just sort of, I don't know, I'm just talking about what I've seen in the last couple of months. We need to look at human beings and consider what's going on.
In my conversations with some of the NPA folks and reviewing, of course, the red book and other materials, it's somewhat difficult to get that down to Edenville Township and what are the actual steps or process or procedures that will work. Now, in consulting and making some calls to NPA, I've found some folks who are helping me take those steps. For instance, in bank statement reconciliations as treasurer, there are certain parts of that would be passed on to the clerk for her entry into the general ledger and so on and so forth. And that's been helpful, but I see it's really needed here because we're coming in new and we really don't know how it should be done.
So my advice would be if you are having problems, because I know it's just obvious, is you don't start with, I'm going to look at, it's a little bit counterintuitive, I'm going to outline what the problem is and what the township would like to do. Then I would look at the red book to see if there's support for doing that, and if the red book says the complete opposite, then you either do what the red book says, or you try to see, is this exactly based on this situation how it applies? You do it from like a problem-solving approach rather than, and I have one, I didn't bring it up in statistics, but I'm gonna bring it up now. I did a training, or a kind of cross-training with a CPA firm, and they do all sorts of problems, or, issues like this, especially financial issues. And the first thing that the auditor said is, people always say it's statutory, and I tell them I don't care. Well, I'm not gonna tell you that because I'm a lawyer, and statutes mean a lot to me, but that, you really need to think about it from problem, what we want our solution to be, okay, let's verify this is supported, and not try to get into doing it wrong, and that's just a wrong, in my opinion, a wrong way to approach it.
I appreciate that, I'm not trying to step on anything, but
Any other questions?
yes.
Okay,
Okay,
please.
thank you.
I thought you might.
Well, I'm waiting politely. I just took notes while you spoke. Kyle and I just have some questions on a few of the slides. So, the date, May 16th, for the Open Meetings Act, it's my understanding. And I, of course, couldn't find it where I read it, but it might not even be in here. I don't know. I looked up so many things, and I'm probably wrong, because I don't do this every day. But my understanding is that if a township has a website, that also has to be updated with meeting notices, minutes, whatever the case may be. Agendas.
Yeah, so that's good. So the Open Meetings Act does not require you to even have a website, or
I agree.
if you do have a website, there's no requirement to even post stuff on it. What the trigger is for special meeting notices. If you post minutes monthly or more frequently, the special meeting notice needs to be on the website. That's the kind of triggering connection.
Just the special. So we don't have to put on our website our meeting dates for the entire year.
No, but I would do it. I mean, there's no purpose in having a website.
But we're not obligated. The only thing that we're obligated, but since this is a clarification that I was not aware of, my understanding of the website was that if we have one, we must keep it updated.
You don't have to. There's no purpose in having a website if you don't keep it updated, but
It might be a good practice.
yeah.
Okay. That's new to me. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. So now I'm looking at, slide 18, page 9, last bullet. Retain records according to Michigan's record retention schedule. You're saying that's a kind of miscellaneous obligation instead of the red book. It says that that's maintained by the clerk unless otherwise assigned by law.
Yeah,
Can you clarify that for me?
yeah, so when I say miscellaneous obligation, that's, obligations that a township has. I tried to structure it in statutes that implicated the township as a whole. The record retention, so the clerk is custodian of records unless otherwise specified by statute. So it is a miscellaneous obligation that the township has as a whole, but the clerk is kind of delegated to making sure that retention works. And it follows this, but what you'll see if you go through the record retention schedule, there's a schedule for a township clerk, there's a schedule for a treasurer, there's a schedule, there's many schedules for township. There's fire department, it's kind of interesting, and what you'll find is you're not retaining things like the statute tell you, or you're retaining things for much longer than the statute. And that's for your open meetings act questions, I'm happy to pull up. I think I have that one.
Well, you don't have to, we can always circle back to that.
Yeah.
But, okay, yes.
Kyle, I know that there is at least a practice, if not a requirement, for us to set our township board meetings in either the December or the January meeting for the coming year. And we did that, we've got them. We said 7 o'clock. We're finding that maybe we've got more to say than we thought we did. And wondering, is that then possible just to change kind of mid-year to a 6 o'clock start?
Yeah, it's by action of the board, and I would post it, where you're posting the current meeting, and then I would also, post on this. Actually, I just was at a council board meeting last week, and that's how we do it.
I'm laughing at my next question. Okay, slide 19, page 10, your title is secondary sources.
Yeah,
What would you recommend as primary sources?
well, primary sources are the statutes themselves, so the revised act of 1836, the case law that's interpreting the statute. secondary sources and is more of like interpretive guide of primary sources that are forming the law, which then are court cases and the legislation.
I think that addresses what you raised, Jim, about being concerned about violations and such. I'm sorry, the statutes, he says, the statutes are the primary sources, and so when we're debating or discussing what we might be in violation of, that maybe we haven't been for 30 years, or maybe we have been.
Yeah, in the cases, so the one thing, I wouldn't start, I read the statute in isolation, I read, let's say, in the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.265, and it says, one sentence that says to do this, and then we didn't do this. That's a big red flag. However, that slide I told you where you read things in harmony, the more specific governs the general, there may be cases that interpret that language to say something, I wouldn't say completely opposite, but much different than you may expect from what the plan language is coming from. So just use it with a little bit of caution. Every township is doing something in violation of the Open Meetings Act, in violation of the revised statutes of 1846, and treating things. Maybe not, but I can, my experience is probably every township is doing something that is not.
So herein lies the crux of the problem, I think, right? We'll have whatever we're looking at, statutes, case law, the red book, various other secondary sources, are reading these. I'm not going to say names or positions, but one person reads it this way, one person reads it this way, and then the line in the sand is drawn and nothing gets done. I would like to come away with some answers of how to rectify that and harmony and coming together and moving forward, all these things I said that last one. Seems to be working.
I mean, one thing,
I would like to be able to point and say, this is your job, you do this. This is your job, you do this.
that would be the statute. If you're gonna have some trouble interpreting them, and I have trouble interpreting, everybody has trouble, courts have trouble interpreting them. The second thing is you could ask the attorney, I know, but that, obviously that's expensive, and that's the public money. So there's a spectrum, right? I disagree whether we are going to, for FOIA, every staff member can accept them, or just one person can accept them. Statute actually answers that question, but let's say that's your question. Then if the ideal that every staff member can accept them, is that really gonna harm the township? Is that really gonna harm someone's right to submit a FOIA request? Probably not. That's a low risk. Maybe that's, you don't ask the attorney, because the right thing's gonna be done. If it's, hey, we're repaying some of our special assessment bond payments, and we have a question whether we can do this, or we can intermingle funds or whatever, and we don't know, and we're kind of, two things say one thing, or we want to self-loan to do all sorts of crazy things that you can do by law. I read it this way, I read it that way. Well, that's a big issue, big important issue. That's something you probably get counsel on. So start with the statute. Actually what I would do, start with trying to find a solution, verify it in the red book, I read it two different ways. I go to the statute. It's going to be the revised statute of 1846. I give you my copy. You can have as much fun as I do every single day. Read it.
I was having nerd out on that.
Yeah. Read it, and then see if that gives you the answer. And then you kind of do, quite frankly, like what a business would do, a risk analysis. Is this really a big deal, or is this not a big deal? What is our common sense solution that we want to do? It doesn't seem very risky, and that's how you make your decision. I'm never going to tell you to violate any of the statutes, but I'm going to tell you that a lot of the questions that you have, there's not always clear answers to. It's impossible. It's we operate off of, townships get their power, if you go back to that slide where townships get their powers by statute, but they are liberally construed, that's what the Constitution says. And powers are fairly implied to townships. The courts read those statutes as broadly and liberally as they basically can to suggest the township did something correctly. It is assumed positive. That's not, and that's the way it has to look. Otherwise, it's just gridlock, and it's just, it doesn't make sense. The whole purpose, I think, of township government is to serve your constituents, and to not be able to do anything is just, and the read statutes where you can't do anything, it's not, it's never been my approach. It's not the approach that I think we should take.
As a small township, this township is very blessed. There was endowment of this building here itself, through an endowment many years ago. And I've always said, this is the township function. I've always said we should pay for this room as we ask other people who want to rent this room. And this, being this an endowment, would you think it would be fair if we paid for our own meeting room? This is a separate building, this is not township, this is not your property, but it's an endowment. And I've always thought, as a person, I just thought we should pay the meeting room like we rent it out.
You have to see, so the one thing that governs townships is they really have to pay fair market value for anything. So if the endowment prescribes that you can use this meeting for board meetings, or like for any purpose, you shouldn't be giving to the endowment because you have the legal right to use it anyway. If that kind of makes sense. So that would be my position on it. Although it's,
What the covenant says, when they gave it to us.
Correct.
We should go by that.
You should go by that, and you
Okay.
shouldn't, just, in essence, donate
Yes.
when you don't have to. Although it's kind of, a little bit, everything's kind of fungible, so if you do improve it, definitely.
We've got a lot of different townships, they don't have a building like this.
No, they do not.
What are you
Go ahead, Greg.
talking about?
I've got.
That's why we're doing this.
All right, okay. Page 11, 522.
Yep.
Top box, statutes without reading of offices, but most can be delegated. So, like, help me understand that. I can only speak to my own position because I've never held any other position other than trustee. Primarily, this is a question we're gonna get to, because I have a different side to it, but
Yeah.
primarily, the fiduciary health of the township is my primary responsibility. And I run for this office, I'm elected in, and then I say, I cannot do that, I cannot be responsible for the fiduciary health of the township. I would like to delegate that duty. I mean, at what point?
You can't do that, because remember, that's not necessarily, that comes from your overall case, that old case law, so that's not really set, that's just kind of, you always have to, in the fiduciary kind of, act in best interest of the township kind of thing. Maybe I'm not answering, I don't think I'm answering.
Maybe I'm not asking it the right way, so
That's one of the duties you can't delegate.
okay, so I asked it the wrong way.
Yeah,
In that gray area between certain positions where some of this, or maybe this, or it could be that, or it could be this, I mean, at what point, I don't think, it's gonna come out right, I probably should.
Is it like, what point?
At what
where
point
just
are you,
delegate everything?
you should do this job, you have to do your job.
So that's a board decision, that's where the board comes in. And you said, like, I'll give you an example. So a lot of townships have, our firm help them with like every FOIA request. And that's just how it, and, statute says the FOIA coordinator. So we write the letter.
That was news to me, I did not know that, I always assumed that was the clerk, I did not realize that was not.
Well, we do it on behalf of the clerk. We write it on behalf of the clerk, or we write zoning enforcement letters on behalf of the firm. It's like, zoning ordinance says the zoning administrator. But it's really a board policy and a budgetary decision as to how much you want to engage in that. The one thing I think to keep in mind, I try to emphasize here is, you might have to do that out of necessity if the job is not getting done. There's not a great way, there's no way to make the job really get done if they're not doing it. And it will just not get done, and it will be the township's problem, it won't be the person's problem. I think what you can do is there's methods to try to entice someone to do their job, and sometimes you're successful, many times you're not successful. Sometimes you go into closed session person's request, and you can talk about
Or
their
not on a
performance.
person's request, but with the data.
Or you can go in the closed session with a confidential written legal opinion, and you can talk about, you know, something. It's really, that's a way that may or may not work, and it many times does not work. You can censure someone at a meeting. Oftentimes I find that does not work, because what the person will do is they will know that it's happening, and they will bring every single one of their friends and family members to the meeting, and they will scream at you while you are saying that they're not doing their job. So, it's kind of a sliding spectrum. It's, I think, first, education, coaching. Second is maybe more serious coaching, where you have a legal opinion. It's like, hey, you're not doing this, blah, 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 blah. Third, it may be you just say, okay, well, if you're not gonna do your job, you know, we're not ordering supplies for you anymore. Bank reconciliations are gonna be done. Our auditing firm, they're gonna do that for you. We're gonna pay them. You're gonna have to work with them if you don't do it. Let's say you're the person putting all the bills in your purse, and you didn't pay your cable bill. That's a crazy story. Okay, we're gonna contact your surety bond, and we're gonna say, yeah, you paid all these bills, you need to make a claim, and we're gonna pay the cable bill and the light bill, and, oh, you did pay $2,000 in bills, and here you go. You figure out what to do with you need to be bonded to be the, whatever position you are, to be, and figure it out. So those are the ways. You can't remove them. The public can recall. I don't think it's appropriate for, you know, township attorneys if they start talking about, like, this is the recall, but that's, public can always do that if they feel that's not working. So those are the options. It is incredibly frustrating. I will give you another real life example. Township I live in had a clerk. He made around $80,000 a year. He never came into the office. At least it was alleged. Almost never, like, you know, one day a week. Everybody else in his job. He still collects the $80,000. And eventually, you know, he got voted out because that's not acceptable. But that's the position that you're in. And, you know, everybody has different styles. My personal style when something happens like that is you carry along with the business, you do it without emotion, and you just, you know, the person's gonna be unhappy, and it's gonna be very awkward, but it's not ignoring, it's somewhat ignoring them, but you just move on. You can't let, you know, individuals cyber what the consequences are.
Only a few questions. Thank you. I was looking for, maybe I was a little too optimistic about tonight. I was looking for some concrete move forward answers, but we've been given a path. Like what you said, you decide how to move forward, consult the red books to make sure your laws consult the statute. So
There is not, and I think you can ask, feel free to ask anybody, what's the thing you can do if a board member is not doing their job? You know, that happens, and it happens so quick. The answer is, you know, possibly, I wish I could tell you, this is exactly what you do, if you know, reduce the salary, well, if there's a statute that doesn't give you that. That's kind of what, you know.
Okay. These are just specifically on the side, the clerk and the treasurer and the trustee, but the clerk and the treasurer slide question are similar. On the clerk, you have, page 12, slide 10.
Yes.
Coordination with treasurer about maintaining general ledger and record revenue. And on the treasurer, I don't see any coordination with clerk. I've never held either of those positions. I'm probably the least qualified person that would be able to speak to either of them. But it's my understanding that they have to work together on a regular basis for a number of reasons. So why would there be coordination with them both?
Yeah, I didn't, so I was running out of space, you know, you can text that call, but that is, they do have coordination. And so this is where it gets, the township clerks of all these, I'm reading from the statute, I'm trying to. The township clerk shall deliver the records, books, and papers. The township clerk shall also open and keep an account with the treasurer of the township and shall charge the town treasurer with all funds that come into the treasurer's hands by virtue of his or her office, and shall credit him with all money paid out by the treasurer on order of proper authority for the township, and shall enter the date and amount of all vouchers and books kept by the township clerk in the office. So that's your primary source, that they do dovetail. But what does that mean in 1846 versus today? It does mean something. something, and you have to read it very closely, but that's where you have the interpretation. And that's where you, that problem-solving thing, method is, this is what we want to do. We see the red book that is trying to interpret this, and then we may go to this and see if what we think is allowed. So the red book may take a different interpretation of this. May say, this is the function that you choose, because that it's 100% guaranteed that that's the same function. But let's say Edenville Township wants to do something else that's gonna work out more for it. Then, try to read this and try to fit it in, and then if you really need help, you go to the attorney and we can give you our opinion as to yes or no.
This is even more minor than my last question on the trustee side, or something about the fiduciary health of the township.
And so that's not listed, in statute. It's not, if you read these, so we'll go to.
I have not.
Yeah,
I have that copy, honestly,
yeah.
you offered it.
Yeah,
So
I'll
like,
give you a copy. You can have it, you'll read about constables and all sorts of stuff.
By the way, he'll give you a test next week.
Yeah, I'll give you a test. But you'll see, like, it doesn't really say that. That's inferred, and that's part of your overall fiduciary duty. Yeah. So, yeah, but that's really, I mean, I'm not, this isn't intended, so if I wanted to reproduce this, I could have reproduced it. It just doesn't need, I think, help very much. If I just quoted from this, because one, would be extremely boring, two, it wouldn't mean anything to anybody, and three, I think it would leave you in the same position that you're in right now, where I think you would just read this, to each other and it'd be that clock game.
It's happening with all the resources, primary, secondary, legal, the lockdown.
Yeah, and I think the logjam is created by starting with what the law says, and I'm gonna try to see what the law says versus what we wanna do, what works for everybody, and then let's see what the law says.
Thank you for answering.
You're welcome.
I will take it, I'm gonna read it. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions from the board? Now you have quite a drive ahead of you. We've got a couple of more things to do. If you wanted to start packing up, I want to be respectful of not getting you home by early.
But whatever the board wants to do, I'll start.
Yes.
Art, can I ask a quick question on the legal authority?
Okay, as the ordinance enforcement officer, I was not gonna open it up to general elections, right? I don't wanna be here all night long.
It pertains to according to Kyle, you're the lead legal agent of the township. So I assume when it comes to enforcement, you're the lead enforcement officer. Per se, the buck stops with the supervisor.
No, so what legal agent really means is service of process. I'm going to sue Edenville Township, who do I give the papers to? I give the papers to, likely give any papers to anybody in the office, but, technically, it would have to be or to the attorney, if the board is comfortable with the attorney. That's kind of it. Or I'm going to sign a deed. Let's say the township wants to buy new piece of property for a park. The supervisor. Clerk makes it.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so where you're gonna get your authority as ordinance enforcement authority, officer is in Edenville Township has the civil infractions ordinance, the blight ordinance, and then the zoning ordinance is gonna specify who the zoning officer is who enforces it.
I was just thinking more of, so if there's a question on the ordinance, the overall board answers the clarity question.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify that.
No other questions for Kyle?
This has been very informative. I thank you, Kyle, for coming and sharing. It's very helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I know, one thing I just want to add on that, I know it's a very tough time for the township, and it can be challenging for me as well. I'm a person as well, and I just really would like to see the township succeed, and I do truly want to work, as cooperatively as I can with the township and try to resolve some of these issues to the extent you need help.
Thank you very much, I do appreciate that. Folks, I wanted to have this months ago, and we just never did. I think this is a first foundation for that, and again, thanking Kyle for that.
Mark, before you go through, let's get him on plug so he gets
Yeah,
the bottom one off there. And we'll take. The power plug is off.
yeah. So, this was step one of a two-step process, and we realized it'll probably be more than two steps before we're done. This was kind of the what. We also talked about how, and that would be facilitated by MTA on that. We have some potential dates that the trainer has. I would like us to see if we can get back to them. The trainer has an availability to do the 3rd, 4th, 7th, or 11th of April. And as folks look at their calendars, I realize we're missing the clerk. My intent would be to look at this and then reach out and let her know what our first date is and our second date. Duration, we have a 6-hour kind of workshop going into how do you implement different policies, different procedures.
When would it start, or would it be in the morning, afternoon?
I think we have flexibility.
Okay, so those days are widest.
Yes. That's my understanding. We still have to nail everything down and whatnot. And Crystal, I'm gonna look at you and Jim, because I think you guys have probably the tightest schedule.
Said 3rd, 4th, 7th, 11th.
Yes. 3, 4, 7, 11.
The 3rd and 7th are, I could do the 4th and 11th, but it would take some maneuvering for me.
So your Crystal is
3rd or 7th.
3, 7, and then 4, 11. Jim?
Looking at the dates, Friday for, I don't want to see whether on the low, late on Friday, we're up to 7, 11, or 6, Fridays aren't enough. Looking back to my calendar here. 4th and 11th. 3rd, Thursday, what's your hours on Crystal Thursdays?
It would just be useful to know if we're talking like 8 to noon, 10 to 2, 12 to 5. I could make it work on the 3rd. I could do the 3rd. Could you do the 3rd, sir?
Yeah, 3rd is open right now, yeah. I
Okay,
changed
yeah.
my personal schedule.
We also have our office is open from 11 to 3.
You're saying 4 hours?
Well, I was wondering if, we were thinking about 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours, you said?
I'm thinking,
6
yeah,
hours or somewhere
probably a
there.
4 hour to 4 to 6.
What, could we start in the late afternoon or middle afternoon and go into the evening?
On Thursday the 3rd.
Yeah. Is that,
I could start early. Well, but if the office closes at 3, we probably should start before 3.
The 3rd?
or a deputy, we would want probably the deputy to do that, so. We could close early. Okay.
It should be 2 days and then
Yeah.
I the clerk to see
Right.
what works for her.
Yep. Well, I've heard 3rd is kind of our top choice.
Could you do the 7th?
Monday? Yeah, that could be done.
Okay. That wouldn't, if we started early enough, so we could finish by 6 and wouldn't be just for us.
Correct.
Should we do 2 o'clock to 6 or something like
Yeah.
that?
I mean,
What are you looking at?
That would be fine.
That's 4 hours. Gives me that
Might
little
be
flexibility.
noon to 4, and then we've got 2 hours of overflow if we need it. Yeah, but, okay, so first choice is 3rd, second choice is 7th. What we're gonna do is we'll target a 4 hour, but book 6, and if we need the extra 2, we've got it.
So you're gonna confirm that with MTA and then we know.
Correct. We I believe that in checking that those dates were all available.
Yeah.
But, and what I will do is I will reach out to Tammy, and I'll ask her, and say, hey, I'm trying to reach out to all you guys. And I'll try to do it all blind copy, Kyle, so we do things, I am trainable, not quite housebroken yet, but I'm trainable.
Just so everybody knows, the 11th is Good Friday.
Okay, so we're right now, we're looking at 3 and 7,
Just so
the
you
3rd and 7th, yeah.
A Thursday and a Monday.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't have that stuff?
No, I've got it, thank you, I appreciate it.
All right. Folks, one of the things, and Kyle, thank you, you helped keep me honest on this one. I did not include public comment on the agenda that was published, but that's one of these things that's implicit in any time the board meets. So we will now go to public comment at 7:50. And I'll take a motion.
A motion to have open comment. Public comment.
Jim motion. Crystal, you second? Okay. Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Woo-hoo! Okay. At 19:50, we go into public comment. You folks have an opportunity for 3 minutes. Mark?
Not loud enough for me half the time. You guys go back and forth, and I never can hear what's going on. There used to be something there and people could hear, but maybe I just can't hear, I don't know.
Okay.
I never used to have it like this when we always had one for a year or something. I'm missing it.
Let's see what we can do. We're working on trying to make it easier to hear. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Yes, sir. Mr. Hall.
Nice to see the attendance here. First, I'd like to say, good job on the board for going in the right direction. And the law is difficult, but I hope that the takeaway that the township gets is that you get to decide the law. You are presumed to be operating in the best interest of the township. If there's things that need to be fixed, you can pass motions and change those laws. If you want to remove a duty from somebody and give it to somebody else, you have that right as a board. Okay? And while I respect the corporate world and the world that you live in, it's a very real thing, especially in today's society, that we are a representative democracy. And a motion of 3-2 passes. And if you get hung up on trying to have a uniform consensus, you won't get anything done. Now, the people that are in the minority, that often doesn't feel well, but our system is built so that you actually get to be heard. But being heard doesn't guarantee that you get the result you want. And that's the beautiful thing about our system. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that because I'm making noise, I should be heard. That creates another issue. The other thing is I'm deeply saddened that the person, in my own personal opinion, that needed the most to be educated doesn't appear to be present. So maybe they were here early on and left and I missed something. But to use the law because you looked up, well, statute 42.7A says this, and you're beating somebody with it, and you ain't been trained in the law, I think you just heard it. The statute means what it means, but it also means something else. And the way that the law is in America is that there are two sides to every single law. That's the system set up that way. You have a prosecutor side and a defense side. And both sides have legitimate reasons for believing they're right on what they think. And every law can be interpreted that way. That's why it's got to go to a judge sometimes. And the judge settles the dispute. You guys can settle your own disputes by passing your own rules for the majority vote. So if you're getting too much resistance in one corner, but you know what you're doing is right for the township, thank the person for participating, and move on. Now you're gonna get people who come from all over, you get aliens and immigrants and people from the next county who wanna tell you how to do things. And you can listen to them or not, that's on you. And I think I'm almost out of time.
Yeah,
Again,
I say you're at 3 minutes, sir.
well, thank you, I'm glad that you did this, so it's a great first step.
Anyone else? Katrina?
I would like to say that I do know that there was a request to put this meeting off so that everyone could be here that's on the board, and that was denied. So Tammy is on vacation. It's really quite unclear when there was a request for that.
So Katrina, let's be open and transparent. This meeting date was set on February 28th. Tammy was in the audience when that happened. She chose not to speak up then. We further reaffirmed the date on March 11th, and that was at the Township regular board meeting. Again, no mention was made of anything. It wasn't until March 17th that Tammy sent out a note saying she was on vacation that we were aware of her time away. By then, things had already happened, and I didn't get her note till about 8:30 last night.
That's not so, because I also have record of that.
Katrina, I'm telling you what I know to
Just
be
saying,
my facts.
that's not accurate.
So,
Oh, we have emails.
Oh, good.
all right. Any other public comment? All right, any other public comment?
You know, I've got one.
Yes, ma'am.
I have sit here and I've listened, I've watched. This bickering is so childish, so childish. We have, don't say yes, because you're part of it.
Yeah.
You are part of it.
You have no idea.
Oh, yes, I do.
I don't think you do.
You guys have got to get your poop in a group. That's all there is to it. You are representing our township, not yours, ours.
And I too am a part of this township.
I don't care where you're
Hey,
from.
order.
I'm
It's your
just
time with the
saying,
floor.
it is so embarrassing
That's my time.
to come here for a pony and dog show is what it amounts to. There is nothing decided, nothing except how do we get along? Come on. That's all I got.
Any other public comment?
I'd like to make a public comment then, based on what she just said. I'd like to know that, is it true that your deputy treasurer refuses to work in the office and needs to work from home? If the township all needs to work together and get along, shouldn't you all be in the same office working together? Again.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Hearing none, public comment closes at 7:58. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second? I have a motion to adjourn at 7:58. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Yep.
Gary's part of the problem, and you're part of the problem. Privately, as long as people think that they have a side, that they're champions, we're gonna keep championing. Until people get up and say, we're tired of all this nonsense. Just do it, something right. Thank you, guys. See you in a couple weeks, next meeting.
Thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
A few weeks here.
Oh, that was your gig, your setup there on that?
Yeah,
You doing all right?
yeah. How about you?
She's giving you holy hell.
Not no more. Well, it's just words.
It is.
I'm just,
Some words are broken words.
oh yeah.
You know, some things are designed to make a person feel better. You know what, it's very good to see you. I'm glad that you're back.
Yeah, early in their plan, but they're gonna go to the pool anymore for the.
And just, I don't know if this was the crux of your question, but you are the top of the food chain when it comes to ordinance enforcement, which is why I always deferred, and I always said, well, let's ask the board.
I wanted to clarify.
I know that, and I'm glad you did, but the board still can at any time step in and correct you.
Leaning towards I might field the questions of the whole board sometime if I have a question.
I would definitely recommend that, and honestly, do the same thing you did with me to Art. You might get a different response, because Art's a different person, right? And some of the stuff that you said, well, like almost all of it, was really good. I just never got around to dealing with it, because I had so much other charges to deal with, and I didn't have the capital for those fights. You know, the people that wanna make it illegal to have chickens, and wanna get rope tickets for all these different things and stuff, and I'm not fighting that stuff. You know?
You too.
But if you let him know, they might be in a hurry to do it. I know they wanna do the houses, have the township pay for it, especially when it's friends of the board who family's house is burnt down.
Good to have you back in town. Hey, glad to be here.
Thank you, Art.
Good to have you back, Jim.
All right, I'll be Jim.
Jim, it's good to see you. You're doing good things here, making this happen.
Hey, they keep showing up. That's the most important thing.
Yeah?
You doing good, all right?
I am well and blessed, I'm doing good. And, I guess I ain't got nothing to do stand around here.
Yeah.
But, life is good, and I heard that this was happening, and I figured I'd come and check it out.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I seen it on a page